All right. Welcome to our very last session or part of today's INNOCRACY conference. So we have the pleasure to have Robert Misik with us. He's an Austrian political writer and author of many books, and his latest book is about Christian Kerr. It's a biography of the Austrian Social Democratic Party leader. Yeah, that was right. So, and he's a contributor, so not Herr Kern, but Robert Misik, to many Austrian and German newspapers, and quite well known. So I'm very pleased that he's going to hold our little end note. He was running around, listening to everyone talking today, trying to figure out what was going on and feeling and sensing what you were thinking and talking and about. And let's listen to him talking about democratizing democracy, the future of empowerment and civic engagement. Welcome, Robert.
Thank you very much. I have now 3 big challenges. First challenge, it was a long day for everybody, for you, for me too. Second challenge, I should sum up in a way or talk about the issues we talked about, also the open questions maybe, and the problems which were more in the air in a way than explicitly. And the third question is that I have to do all this in this idiom which is worldwide known as bad Austrian English. So these are the 3 obstacles we are facing now. I'm facing now. My first point is, why are we here? Obviously, because we have some feeling, or most of us have the feeling that democracy doesn't work as good as it should. That there is such a kind of discontent of the democratic systems we are living in, also by with all differences of democratic systems in the different societies and countries. Because if we would have the idea that everything is okay and wonderful, there would not be a necessity to talk about improving democracy. So, what did we hear now, here in this day? Some ideas, a lot of projects, also a lot of best practice projects. We heard about project on the macro scale, and also projects on a micro scale in a way. For example, different apps and something like that. We heard about movements who founded new parties, and we heard about parties who were quite new, and also parties who were quite old and traditional that tried to modernize in a way. For example, the Social Democratic Party in Germany. We had a friend from Rheinland-Pfalz, I think, here. I had the impression that there are some possibilities, the possibilities that there are some traps in our way talking about democracy and modernizing democracy. One trap is that we can have hundreds or thousands or millions projects, ideas, wonderful ideas, which are followed by 10 or 20 or 100 persons and people, but that they maybe don't sum up to a new arrangement. That might be one trap we are facing. For sure, we have, I think, in the common sense, some popular images for this problem. Popular images that mean there might be no problem with that, because you know the image of the drops, 1 drop, 2 drops, 3 drops are only drops, but 100 and 1,000 drops and millions of drops are an ocean afterwards. That is a popular image, that drops and drops and drops sum up to an ocean. But maybe drops don't sum up to an ocean. Maybe it's only a popular metaphor, and they don't are real in reality. That's the possibility. So there can be the possibility, and we know it from reality. We know it from the reality of our societies, that we have a lot of civil society initiatives that are wonderful and wonderful projects, but they don't really get in touch with the system. With the system of the democracy we feel discontent about. We know that from reality and from the last years and decades. The second trap might be that we talk a lot about processes, democratic procedures, practices, new practices, and that we fall in love with practices. That we fall in love with practices and forget that not the practice is the project, but to change opinions, to change mindsets, to change whole baselines, when we can put that in that way, of a whole society. And what we don't talk about is often what's about power. What's about power? We cannot ignore the problem of power in our society. We have all the time, or often we have the impression that if we produce better practices and better procedures, procedures which bring more people in the democratic deliberation, then democracy will be more democratic and decisions will be better afterwards. And we forget that the decisions are not neutral. The decisions for themselves are first outcomes of power structures, and second, the results are the main thing, not the procedures that lead us to the results. Let's come back to discontent. I said that we here in this room are here because we feel a discontent with the functioning of our democratic systems. And what we also know, that's also the reason maybe we are here, that there is a lot of discontent also outside this room, outside our milieus, our spheres. There's a lot of, we can also call it the popular rage in our societies, the popular rage that also leads to the election of right-wing populist parties and other parties who are something like anti-political protest parties. A popular rage of people who have the feeling or the sentiment or the idea or the emotion that politicians, parties, political elites, they are not even interested in me. People that have the idea or the feeling or the knowledge, I don't have any voice in all of that. People who think that, and often they are right by thinking that, that there is a sphere of establishment politics that is a closed sphere, that there is a political class that is closed already, that there is a class of professional politicians, and this class of professional politicians, by all divisions they also have something like a complicity. The complicity of the class of the politicians against all the others. That there is a political establishment, an elite, that also mix with an economic elite, like the friends from Spain, from Podemos, say la casta. And this sphere of political and economic elites establish a sphere of, let's call it, systemic corruption. And also some reasons for the discontent are that these old parties, the traditional parties that form our traditional democratic systems, they are not up to date anymore, they are out of date, they are old-fashioned, their representatives are gray. All that sums up to the discontent with the functioning of our democratic systems. Third point I want to make. the question, is democracy that's a solution? That's a question. Because it's not so self-evident that this question is yes. I suspect that democracy and more democracy is the solution. I think so. But it's, as I said, it's not self-evident. I said before, many people in our societies have the feeling they don't have a voice in all of that. So we can assume if they have a voice in all of that, they will be more satisfied. But maybe we're wrong. Maybe they are only saying, my problem is that I don't have a voice in all of that. Maybe they would also be satisfied if there would be political forces in supply, to use that word from consumer politics, or from the consumer sphere, if there are political forces in supply that are not old-fashioned, that have bold programs. I have to put that away. I'm getting old. I'm getting old. That have bold programs that are also radical, at least in the sense that they are authentic, that they are value-orientated, that stick to their values and their confessions, and that bring out of this inner functioning of these parties smart solutions. Maybe people would be satisfied with that. Then they would vote for them and would not have the problem that they want a voice in this process. Maybe that's right. I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong with that, but we shouldn't forget that people don't really want maybe be involved in the democratic process more than voting for the parties they like, if there are parties they like. For that, maybe they would be more satisfied if there are new parties they can vote for, or if there are old traditional parties that modernize in the way that they are seen as qualified parties in supply. So is democracy the solution to that? Yes, I think democracy is the solution to that, because to transform the traditional party system, which means to bring new parties into the system, or to transform old traditional parties, to make parties, old ones and new ones, to vibrant ones, to lively ones, it needs to democratize them. And in the case for traditional parties, that means to shatter, to shake the apparatchik logic and the apparatchik culture in them. Next point I want to make. It's interesting that new parties, and we heard some of them here, often call themselves movements. The reason is very clear. They want to distinguish from that which has which seems old-fashioned, and old-fashioned seems parties because of the old-fashioned old parties. So these new parties want to call themselves movements, which is in a kind strange, because they are parties, not movements. And on the other hand, for sure, there is something like a connection between parties and movements, but the same also, this is also the case with the old traditional parties, because as we all know, they are in a way, or were in a way, results of movement. We know that from the labor movement, which was for 100 years a movement, we would call a lively movement, which has their parties representing them, Social Democracy in Germany, Labour Party in Great Britain, also in a way Democratic Party in the United States, a little bit different situation. And also that's the case for the Green parties here, here in Germany, in Austria, in other countries, and also for other parties which are representing movements. So, but most of these parties lost, or most of these movements lost their character or most of the parties lost their character as movement parties. And when it's beginning that they are losing these characters, this starts a vicious cycle. If parties are not lively anymore, no new people come in, and if no new people are coming in, it's getting worse and worse. It's getting worse and worse. There's afterwards also a competition about jobs, about career options, so that people in the parties not even try to bring new people in. They try to sometimes that people stayed out. Two points I want to make. I talked about traps, possible traps. One possible trap is the temptation that we feel, or that we have the idea that we can make democracy more vibrant by autonomous, independent groups, initiatives that we and our 10 best friends do the right thing, I do my thing, which is also a little bit interconnected with the mainstream idea of individualism, that you shouldn't mix too much with normal folks or other guys, that we should stay away from parties, that we should stay away from power because power is dirty, and that we should all stay away from institutional politics because institutional politics is boring, and it's also, as we know, especially if we look at the other guys who are in the institutional politics, it is something like a cage. And we should also stay away from the discourse battle to win over majority. But how should we, with that temptation, trigger sustainable change? In the best case, or in the worst case, I don't know, there will be vibrant projects in the civic society, but the elections are still won by the others. By Trump, by Orban, by Mr. Kurz and Strache in my country. The question is how to bring change to traditional party systems and how to win over broad majorities, how to build new parties who can fill the void, how to establish trust again, how to have, at the end, the power to establish all these good innovations we talked about, and how to bring as many people as possible to involve. Last point, the question is that we can only bring change to the mindset of society by all of this. And I found a wonderful quote yesterday by the Brazilian teacher and reformer Paulo Freire, who said one time, "What can we do now in order to do tomorrow what we are unable to do today?" And I think that is really the challenge, because we now see, we are here because we know that we can, some things we cannot do today because the circumstances are in a way that we are hindered in that way. And the question for all of us is how to change the circumstances that we can do tomorrow, the things we cannot do today. Thank you very much. Bitte. Oh, eine Kuchen.
Thank you, Robert. A cake. Thank you. You're welcome. So, thank you so much for these thoughts. Okay, I have to go up. All right. There's a lot of light up here. All right. So, thanks for these thoughts, and thanks for bringing us back into the meta perspective. I want to close this conference with 3 thoughts, which I believe are 3 thoughts of encouragement. And I'm trying to close the bracket which Maya opened today in the morning. And I'm doing this, and I want to say this before I start, with a very deep sense of gratitude because I think this day was, it was very enriching, and it was such a pleasure to see what happens when you bring people who have not met before, at least in most cases, together in one place, and then this amazing dynamic unfolds, which I sometimes experience, and it always gives me goosebumps, because I could see that here and there, you know, some lasting connections were made, and I think this is really the ripple effect we were hoping for when we decided, okay, we will put all the work that goes into such a conference into this conference and do it. So that's great. Thanks for being here, and thanks for well, going with this flow. So. Well, I already threatened you with bringing us back to the meta level, and this is what I'm trying to do now. And it's going to be 3 very brief thoughts, and I hope they're provocative enough to basically give you a bit of stimulation when you go back and process what you heard today, which I think were very different impulses, but I believe there are red threads, and they will all make a lot of sense if you fit them into the broader frame. So let's go back to a very basic thing, and I think this is something where we need to be more courageous, especially in public debate. And I say this to you as change makers, especially. So, as you all know, democracy originally only signifies the rule of the majority. But when we talk about democracy, we of course mean something which is a lot more. Arguably, we don't even talk so much about the majority principle when we talk about democracy today. We talk about the rule of law. We talk about a humanist worldview. That is the core that differentiates our systems from systems like China or Russia, which also stick to the majority principle, right? This is not a differentiating factor. And what lies in this thought, I think, is something very valuable. That we need to be bold when it comes to killing the sacred cows in the room. And I think we're not bold enough today in the public debates, right? We need to start talking about how we can shift the default mode of the democracy we know to something which is new and which can give birth to dynamics we have not yet seen and experienced. And I think it was amazing to have Erich and Adela here today, who basically gave us an alternative to the majority principle. So that was, it seemed like coordinated, but they actually applied, so that was really great. And as you all know, in the public debate, a couple of books have come out which actually question the majority principle, and I think this is actually, it's one of the weakest links in the democracy we have. At the same time, we do know, and I think many of you talked about this today, that we need to strengthen participation, but not just by, you know, building more channels in the existing system, but by making participation smarter in a system that as a whole is smarter, and that as a whole understands that we need to protect the whole, which we are part of. And then it starts to make sense. And then it starts, for me, to be really interesting to talk about participation, which in the current frame mostly tends to be a pain in the ass, right? And I'm not a huge fan of direct participation in the existing system we have, because it tends to stress the negative sides of the democracy we have today. So that is my first thought. As you see, I'm not sticking to my talking cards now, Laura. You inspired me today. Yeah. So let's go to the second thought. As you all know, inequality tears societies apart today, globally as well as nationally, and I briefly touched upon this when I spoke in the morning. And yeah, we can talk about the redistribution of wealth in the existing system, and I think we have to. And I think we have to do this very intensively. But the core issue really lies in separating the capitalist market from democracy. As Lance told us, where's Lance? There you are. Yeah, for a long time we have been told that a free market equals a free society. Today we know, Thomas wrote a book about this as well, by the way, so you can do some reading. The market and democracy pretended to be Siamese twins and formed an unholy alliance which basically threatens to tear our societies down, right? And this is something which we really need to start thinking about very radically. Because even if you think you're part of the political center, especially then, because we need radical reform, and I think this is also something which we saw when Maya talked today in her keynote, we need radical reforms if we want to keep the whole. So radical reform is actually in the interest of the center. And radical reform needs to become part of mainstream politics in the next years, rather sooner than later. So if you, as change agents, shy away from words like radical and from paradigm shift and transformation, what have you, or reduce these words to meaning which fit the current paradigm, you're deeply flawed, because you can use the energy you have, this amazing change energy we felt in this room today, to push the mainstream actors towards embracing something which they will be embracing sooner or later anyhow. Probably because of disasters, but I think if we're quick enough and if we start moving now, we can still build meaningful new systems which enable us to live a life in dignity as the global community and as an ecosystem which right now we're destroying. But I don't want to go down this depressing road again, so I'm just going to skip these parts, okay? So, it's kind of hard to find a thin line between encouragement and just being realistic. Well, whatever. And I want to refer again to Maya when I introduce my third and last thought. She brilliantly explained and showed us in her models that climate change is an issue of existential importance and is an issue which really needs reframing. It needs different paradigms. The way we look at the world needs to change in order for us to be able to tackle it. And it is perverse when you think about it that today we are still linking the legitimacy of our democratic systems and of our achievements as governments to levels of economic growth and material well-being, while at the same time we know that this way of doing, of working and of producing is basically destroying ourselves. So we're developing a kind of permanent schizophrenia, which is especially painful to see when you look at the Green parties, the parties on the left liberal side, and Social Democrats. It's just absolutely insane, because not even logically it makes sense, right? I mean, many people say, okay, well, these people didn't really get it because they haven't actually experienced it with their gut and their heart. And I say, yeah, it's true, we have a problem. When it comes to the, well, we're very head-focused, head-centered when it comes to how we do politics. But even when you think about it, in a logical way, it doesn't make fucking sense, right? Right. Yeah, you have to beep this in the video. Right. But I want to encourage you to push this out there very forcefully wherever you are, because I don't think we have the time to be tame and polite and leave people in their nice comfort zones. I'm just so sick of it. And I want to transport some of my anger and my fear and my sadness into this group, because I think you all have it, right? You all have it. We all have it. Yeah, there you go. There you go. Yeah. But this is what makes us real when we're in public and when we speak. If we blindside this anger and this fear and this anxiety, people will not actually feel us. Right? So this is where the energy is, and I want you to tap into it when you do what you do. So. Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. So there's an emotional and there's a very spiritual dimension when we talk about the transformation of democracy, right? Which also means talking about the transformation of ourselves. So I think it's important to talk about this, and this is where part of the solution lies. And I want to include this little cliffhanger, because currently, or for the last 1.5 months, I've been dragging myself through writing this paper on the stuff I was just talking about, and it's not easy to wrap my head around it. but I feel it's really important to put thought into it and energy into it and just to get it out there. And if only 3 people read it and 1 person does something with it, it's already worth the time invest, right? So I want to encourage you, please do the same. I really feel, and I mean, I used to be such a cynicist guy a couple of years ago, but the more I do, and I think this is an experience many of you share, the more I do in the public space, and the more I bring the parts I really care about into the public space, the more dynamic I create. And it's a beautiful feeling which enriches my life and which hopefully also enriches society. And all of us can do this, right? And so I want to, it's kind of like a mess now, but I really want to, I want to encourage you. I want to encourage you to do this.
I have a dream.
Yeah, I have a dream. I have a dream. Yeah. All right. That's beautiful. Sorry, I skipped half of my speech, but whatever. I want to close with a couple of thank yous. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming and for being here, for spending the time with us. Not everyone is here for the whole day, but even the guys who just popped in for 1 session, I heard they enjoyed it. They felt that there was a very good energy in this room, and I think it's great we co-created this today. I want to thank the Federal Ministry for Family Affairs, Senior Citizens, Women and Youth, because they provided the funds for this, and it's amazing that they made this project possible. They made it possible for us to build a team at DPZ, to print nice stuff like this. So I really appreciate this, because a couple of people had to, well, very vehemently argue for this project, and this is what I really respect. I want to thank you, Laura, for putting up with me and for driving this project so forward in such a smart and forceful way. I think it's a blessing to work with you. And Sophie, you were amazing over the last weeks. You're a blessing for this team. And without your tremendous amounts of energy and your positive vibes, this conference would not have happened. So I can't thank you enough for doing this. It was great. I want to thank the DPZ team as a whole, because a lot more people helped us co-create this experience today. So it's great that you did this. I thank you very much for investing the time, the energy, for coming for such a long day. I hope you're enjoying the half-free day off tomorrow. I think that's what's happening, right? Yeah, it's a half. It's a very German institution. I don't know what to say. Linnea, I want to thank you for the fabulous moderation here on the main stage. That was great. Thank you for doing this. Yeah, and most importantly, of course, I want to thank all the session hosts. I want to thank you, Robert, and I want to thank Maya Gope for applying, for replying to our emails and calls, for actually coming here, for writing for the final publication. Without you, it would not have been possible to do such a day. And I'm feeling very, very grateful that you all came. And now enjoy, Laura, I want to ask you on stage, because you wanted to say thank yous with me. Now I did everything alone. I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm used to that now. No, you said it all really nicely. The only thing I have to add is...
Up there.
Oh. No, I think...
No, I think...
No? The only thing I have to add is that I want to get the team and all session hosts on stage to take a family photo in the end. That would be really important for me. And then the next minute we go downstairs to have a drink together and to close this fabulous day. That's everything I had to say.
Thank you.
Thank you all.